Joining us now, Select Committee member and chair of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Adam Schiff. Chairman Schiff, I want to start with your assessment thus far of the hearings that have unfolded on January 6th.
Well, our goal has been to expose the multiple lines of effort by Donald Trump to overturn his lost presidential election. And I think we are presenting a very clear, compelling case to the public that he was the first president in history to lose an election, to know he lost, and yet tried to hold on to power. And he did this in multiple ways. He did this by pushing this big lie that the election was somehow rigged. He did this by putting pressure on the vice president, as we demonstrated in our most recent hearing, to the point where he put his own vice president's life at risk. And in so many other ways, brought this country to a dangerous edge. So I think we've been conveying that. There's more to come, more, I think, quite powerful evidence of the president's culpability and how close we came to losing our democracy.
In terms of Watergate, there's been a lot of parallels to and comparisons to those Watergate hearings that took place. And you mentioned some of the close figures to President Trump at the time that we've heard from through these hearings. You know, former Attorney General Bill Barr, the president's daughter, the former president's campaign manager. And some of that testimony has been described as stunning, things that we learned about, you know, Rudy Giuliani. Have we seen our John Dean moment yet, or our Alexander Butterfield moment yet, when we learned that, you know, of course, the President Nixon was recording conversations in the Oval Office that sort of stunned people? Have we had that moment yet, or is that to come?
You know, we've had dozens of those moments, but this is a different time than Watergate. And part of the reason why this is a different time is that there is a cable news station devoted to giving Trump supporters their own separate information environment, not exposed to contrary facts. So Fox won't broadcast these, not in their prime time. And that's for a reason. And I think that if Richard Nixon had had Fox News, he would have probably never been forced out of office. It's a singular disservice to the country that I think Fox is depriving its viewers of this important information. But nonetheless, we are reaching millions and millions of Americans who don't live, eat, and breathe politics, but are deeply interested in that, in what took place and how close we came to losing our democracy. In that sense, it is very much like Watergate. But, you know, the fact that the president knew the lie he was telling was a big lie, was told by his attorney general, that's like a Watergate moment. The fact that he was told that this pressure campaign on the vice president was also unconstitutional, that's another Watergate moment. There are so many of them, but I think that people have become dull to the shock of this former president's lack of ethics, and that is a challenge to deal with.
Once these hearings wrap up, do you believe the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, will have enough evidence to charge the former president with a crime?
I think Merrick Garland and the Justice Department already have enough evidence to open an investigation of Donald Trump and others in his administration. It's not my opinion alone. Judge David Carter, federal judge in California, looking at a small subset of the evidence, reached that same conclusion. Now, whether the Justice Department will have proof beyond a reasonable doubt to indict and convict the former president or anyone else, they will need to decide. But there is already adequate evidence for them to begin an investigation. And we cannot have a situation where the president cannot be indicted, which is currently the opinion of the Justice Department, at least it has been in the past. And when they're a former president, they can't even be investigated because it would be too controversial or divisive or seem political, because that gives a kind of immunity to a president that is dangerous. Dangerous in the abstract and even more dangerous in the very concrete example of Donald Trump.
Chairman Schiff, we'll leave it there. We appreciate your time here on Inside California Politics.
Thank you.